How do you depict something that you can't truly comprehend? Throughout my career, I've attempted to do just that. Make art about subjects that I don't really fully understand. I came by this pursuit honestly. I was raised by scientists. My mother is a microbiologist, and my father's a geologist. When I was growing up, they did a great job of sharing their fascination with the natural world with me. My father especially loved challenging me with really huge concepts. So, evolution, the infinite universe, consciousness, just to name a few. It was later in life that I realized these ideas were related to the philosophical idea of the sublime. Now, in casual conversation, we use the term sublime to mean something that's really great, and we might use it to describe an especially delicious piece of cheesecake, for example. In philosophy, sublime refers to a greatness beyond measure. Sublime subjects are, by definition, beyond human comprehension or adequate description. When in the presence of the sublime, we may feel a pleasurable sense of wonder, but it can also be terrifying and make us feel insignificant. A classic example is being on a ship during a raging storm at sea. So, when we witness the sublime, our individuality falls away, but we may feel a oneness with the universe as we recognize that we are a tiny fragment of an incredibly, unimaginably vast reality. Because the sublime subjects are literally beyond human comprehension, if we're going to try to talk about them, we need to create a simplified stand-in in place of the actual concept. Now, my father, when I was growing up, delighted in blindsiding me with these simplified explanations of huge scientific concepts. So, for example, 10-year-old me might be at the dinner table talking about dinosaurs, as I was known to do, and my father would say, "You know, speaking about dinosaurs, the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. And that's a really long time. But if you took that 4.5 billion years and compressed it to one calendar year, the Earth and the rest of the solar system is created on January 1st. The dinosaurs don't go extinct until almost a full year later, on December 26th. Humans show up on December 31st at 11:36 p.m. And Jesus lived and died 8 seconds ago." So I'm sitting there with my mind thoroughly blown, and he sits back feeling pretty good about himself. So these simplified examples of vast subjects are staples of scientific education. And they're beautiful ways that you can present a sublime subject in a way that we can digest. Now, being an artist, I'm especially interested in the visual ones. So Ernst Haeckel was a 19th century naturalist who made a number of evolutionary tree illustrations. This one, called The Pedigree of Man, is meant to show how every organism that has ever lived on the planet is interrelated. Now that is no small task. And it was even harder when the idea was relatively new and it had completely changed the way that we thought about the world and our place in it. Now, science isn't the only field where people have attempted to depict incomprehensibly huge events or ideas. In this religious painting by 15th century Italian painter Giovanni di Paolo, he shows us the creation of the universe. In it, the universe is presented as a globe, with the Earth at the center of the globe surrounded by a series of concentric circles. They represent first the 4 elements, then the known planets, the sun, and finally the constellations of the zodiac. Presiding over the scene is God the Father. He's carried by angels and bathed in a divine light. It's a lovely image, and it's one of my favorite paintings. But it's really, really weird. Now, when I've attempted to depict equally vast subject matter, I try to use I've commonly tried to use the symbolic narrative of religious imagery with the explanatory techniques of science. So in this piece, called KT and the Second Coming, I've used the visual language of diorama to depict the most famous mass extinction of all time. The KT extinction event happened when a 6-mile-wide asteroid smashed into the Earth at 45,000 miles an hour. This created an explosion more powerful than the explosion that would be created if every nuclear weapon that currently exists on the planet were to detonate simultaneously. Now try to wrap your mind around that for a second. I don't know if I can truly even imagine a single nuclear detonation. I mean, when I try, I go to some old newsreels and a scene from Terminator 2, and like, that's about the best I can do. So this Manhattan-sized chunk of rock and ice smashes into the Earth at amazing speeds, and it throws up so much debris that it encircles the planet and blocks out the sun for years. This killed all of the non-avian dinosaurs and more than half the species on the planet. The ecosystem was absolutely devastated. But every mass extinction is followed by an explosive period of creative evolution as the survivors adapt, morph, and rush in to fill the niches that were vacated by the recently departed. In my diorama, the asteroid is played by a taxidermy chicken who is simultaneously playing the role of destroyer, creator, and omen of the future, as the chicken is literally one of the wonders that the dinosaurs evolved into. Now recently, I've been focusing on just one Sublime event. There have been 5 mass extinctions in the history of the planet, and many scientists believe that we're currently in the beginning of a 6th mass extinction. What distinguishes this mass extinction is that it's caused by human activity. Now that is a terrifying prospect, but the lovely silver lining, you'll remember, is that every mass extinction is followed by an explosive period of creative evolution. So thinking about how all the new species evolved from the survivors of the past era, I've been sampling snippets from art history, primarily from paintings that were done around the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and recombining and recontextualizing them into new sparse landscapes. So in this painting, Jan Weenix's hair and Zubarin's Lamb of God have merged into a single creature that's monstrous, yet powerless. It hangs suspended in an amorphous environment that is still yet to find its equilibrium. In this painting, I've transformed one of Martin Johnson Head's hummingbirds into an aberration that's crowned with a dozen useless beaks. So I want these creatures to be disturbing, absurd, maybe funny, but definitely sympathetic. This is not one of my paintings. You might recognize it as Fragonard's The Swing. It's a Rococo masterpiece of hedonistic decadence, where the shoe of one clandestine lover is lost in the heat of passion. In my painting, the people and the lush forest are gone, and only the shoe remains. I think out of context, the shoe takes on a darkly humorous tone. After I finish this, whenever I look at it, I imagine the sound of a cartoon car crash. So in this painting by Dietlub Blanc, a surprisingly adorable nightmare sits on the chest of a sleeping woman. In my painting, the last one I'm going to show tonight, Blanc's rabbit-headed imp doesn't have any more innocent sleepers to terrify, so he sits crestfallen on the back of a headless crocodile. So I want these paintings to be absurd and sad, but also oddly beautiful and strangely hopeful, because they're not only about the terrible and unnecessary loss that we may experience, but also about the vast and unknowable wonder of what is yet to come. Thank you very much.